What's up everybody, James Duggan here with IGN to show off the 6 new weapons coming to Battlefield 1 in the Turning Tides DLC. 2 new maps and 1 new mode will also be making their debut in Turning Tides, and for more information on those, check out IGN.com. You'll notice almost immediately that the ground looks a little off. That's called a white box environment and is a fancy way of saying that the level is untextured. Why EA and DICE chose to show off 2 new maps in this state, I'm not quite sure, but regardless, I had a good time and I do think the core of the content is there. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a comment and shoot me a follow on Twitter, and without further ado, let's get into the arsenal. First up is the British-made Farc Erhilde rifle for the medic class. And a little bit of history before we get into how it performs. It was one of the first automatic rifles designed in the 1900s and had a 19-round drum magazine, which of course in BF1 equates to a 20-round capacity with the chambered round. Shout out to me not reviving my teammates. The weapon saw limited use in the hands of British Royal Airmen before mounted machine gun turrets became commonplace. But the war ended before the Farc Erhilde rifle could see large-scale infantry use. Now in-game, its main competition, I would think, is the M91 SL, which is a weapon that has remained popular in the medic class in Battlefield 1 going all the way back to launch. Now, the Farc Erhilde is able to compete in terms of magazine capacity with a 20-round drum mag, but I don't think it has quite the rate of fire and certainly not the stability of the SL M91. However, the assumption there would be that it has greater range potential and damage. Now, we'll have to wait until the DLC comes out to see those stats side by side, but to me it felt like a totally viable, if not optimal choice for a medic primary.
I can fix your wounds!
Let's move on to the first offering for the Scout class in the new DLC, and this is the Type 38 Arisaka, which is the precursor to the Japanese Type 99 rifle, which saw frequent use in World War II. The Type 38, though, had some significant flaws, including frequent jams, misfires, and a poorly designed lock mechanism, which acted as a reserve for errant gunpowder, which means that after a while, all of that gunpowder would accumulate and eventually combust, burning the user's face. So, not something you would probably want to use in real life. In Battlefield 1, I had a lot of fun with this weapon. Of course, this is not as competitive a choice in terms of a sniper rifle as something like the Martini, the Gewehr, or the Lebel, but in a situation like this, overlooking an enemy position at mid to long range, this is where the Type 38 shines. Nothing too far, of course, because it lacks the optics to go long range, but with a bayonet, something fun nonetheless. Speaking of scopeless bayonet rifles, the next weapon is called the Carcano M91 carbine, and is a rifle that saw frequent use in both World War I and II. And it used a 5-round box magazine, which in Battlefield 1 translates to you having to remove the entire magazine and insert a new one, as you can see me doing right now, instead of loading individual cartridges like you can with some of the other bolt-action operated rifles in this game. Now, this rifle is dissimilar to the Arisaka in the sense that the bolt-action mechanism is incredibly fast in Battlefield 1, and I actually think this is a lot more viable of a close to mid-range rifle and kind of puts the Scout into the DMR category of modern military shooters. The M91 carbine is a 2-body shot kill weapon just like many other bolt-action rifles and snipers in Battlefield 1. But what separates the Carcano once again is that rate of fire potential, and you can really see that put through its paces here as I spawn behind a team which is spawning in on their teammates and just go absolutely nuts. This is where this rifle shines, and I actually think it's a pretty powerful weapon, something I am definitely looking forward to using once Turning Tides goes live. The M1917 Browning machine gun is certainly the standout weapon from this DLC, something that I think will take the top slot in the support category. The magazine is enormous, 250 rounds. It's got a pretty steady rate of fire. The recoil is definitely something that you can control, so run and gun is totally viable, contrary to how this weapon would have been used historically. The weapon weighed 106 pounds, so it was definitely not a run and gun weapon like you see me using it here. It was fired from a prone position or fired from a tri or bipod. This is the Browning machine gun that saw use as early as World War I all the way up until the late 1960s by U.S. Allied forces in Vietnam. So a tried and tested weapon of war, to be sure, and it certainly evokes that status in Battlefield 1. Jumping back to the magazine capacity for a second, oftentimes I would die before I even reloaded. Now, you could write that off as typical IGN gameplay, but I think if you try it yourself, you will have the same experience. You can go on a disgusting streak without ever needing to reload, and that is such an awesome feeling for a versatile weapon like this. It's also worth noting that there is a telescopic variant of the M1917, which I enjoyed quite a bit, and I imagine you will too. However, as with all LMGs, what the scope reveals is how unreliable the accuracy gets when you're at those further distances, so if you're going into an engagement at long range, you of course will want to be prone. Moving right along to another M1917, but this is the M1917 trench carbine, which is in no way related to the Browning machine gun. This is something that was produced in very limited quantity in World War I and offered to the German Army, who rejected the carbine based on its cost. It's chambered in 9mm, which is the same cartridge used by the Mauser C96. And if you actually look at this weapon compared to a Mauser C96 with a shoulder stock, it's virtually identical. Of course, the main difference being that 40-round detachable magazine, which in Battlefield 1 makes all the difference. It's no longer a sidearm. This is a primary and behaves as such. It's interesting. It's semi-automatic. It's close to mid and even stretching out to some far-range encounters performs pretty well. It's something that I think is dissimilar to a lot of what the other assault weapons offer, and as a result, I do think it has a place in the game, and it's something that I'm looking forward to using more. Now, the main drawback of this weapon is its damage. You can put a lot of hits into somebody before they go down, but it's got almost no recoil. It is very easy to control, very easy to shoot, kind of like a marksman pistol if you've ever done any target shooting, and super fun. I had a great time with this weapon, and again, can't wait to use it when Turning Tides goes live. Finally, it's time to talk about one of my favorite, if not my favorite weapons. Not something that I think is particularly viable, but something that is super fun, and this is the Steyr M1912, which was the world's first machine pistol. The weapon featured an integral magazine that cannot be removed and must be loaded with stripper clips, which, in the context of a machine pistol of modern day, is an extreme design flaw. But in Battlefield 1, it gives it this really interesting gameplay loop, where you are taking a long reload time, and you have the 16-round magazine, and you are emptying all 16 rounds in basically a single press of the mouse, which is very fun. You're going to win just about every single 1v1 trade at even medium to close range, unless you are doing something terribly wrong with your aim. Going more than 1v1, though, 1v2 or 1v3 becomes a very tenuous proposition because of the reload time on this weapon. You really need to make good use of your sprinting and maybe do even a little bit of Battlefield 2 dolphin diving to supplement that time that it takes to reload the weapon. But if you're looking for a good time and something different that isn't necessarily in the game right now, I think this is a really great addition and something that I love from a game design perspective. You can look forward to Battlefield 1's Turning Tide DLC to be released in waves, no pun intended, on December and January of 2017. If you liked the video, be sure to comment and subscribe, and if you really enjoyed it, why not give me a follow on Twitter? Thanks so much, and for everything Battlefield 1 and first-person shooters in general, you can keep it right here on IGN.